How's everybody doing? It's Corey DeAngelis, your host of the Red Pen Podcast. You might notice this week there's only one host of the podcast. Usually there's two. This is the Red Pen Podcast, powered by Americans for Fair Treatment. I'm a senior fellow with them, and usually we have Chip Rogers, the CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment, on the podcast as well. But no worries, he'll be on next time. He's traveling today. And we'll get some more insight from him next time. We have a lot of stories to go over, and we have a special guest. So don't worry. You don't just have to watch me the entire time. There's someone else that's going to join the show. His name's Jake Altman. He's a former staffer at a union that was actually an affiliate of Randy Weingarten's American Federation of Teachers. And he has some things to say about the unions and some of the things that they've been doing wrong at the University of Michigan. And also about Randy Weingarten getting involved with pension funds and using their holdings in the pension funds from the union members for political purposes, to bully Target, to say, you know what, we hold 7% of your stock in our pension funds. If you don't boycott ICE, there's gonna be consequences. So we'll have Jake Altman to talk about that, and also the union's going out of control, raising funding for these anti-Jewish groups at the University of Michigan. There's also a federal indictment from the Department of Justice, and 8 people are named in it. We'll get into that as well at the University of Michigan. But before we loop Jake Altman in, let's go over the headlines of the week. There's some crazy stuff. You might see the title of this tweet talks about, if you're from Colorado, there's to be some red flags raised up because there was a teacher fired in Colorado recently at a Denver public schools. And, Denver public schools has only about a 33% math proficiency rate. And CBS, of all places, had this headline this week, and a lot of people were responding basically saying, good. The headline was, Colorado students report same-sex peers were made to kiss during a class assignment, and the teacher was ultimately fired. And so, a little bit of background on this. The teacher was an LGBTQ plus activist. And for, any other story, this really wouldn't matter all that much. But what was reported in the investigation was that the students were reporting that allegedly every time 2 kids were, basically ordered to kiss each other in class, it was always the same sex. And in fact, it was always 2 girls, it was reported, that were told to kiss each other. And if this wasn't weird enough, the kids were being graded on this as an assignment. And some of them reported that, they felt like or one of them refused to do so, and they were given a 0. And so the teacher basically was out of line. The school board voted 7-0 to fire the teacher. I'd say there should be criminal punishments attached to this as well. I haven't seen any charges filed in the state of Colorado on this story, but maybe there should be. But Libs of TikTok later reported pretty quickly that she found that this teacher was also on another website for an elementary school in the state. Another district basically popped up right after she was fired from Denver Public Schools, which raises the question of, did the new school district know that this was happening? Was it swept under the rug? We've heard for decades that the public school system has basically passed the trash in some cases, where an investigation is launched into a teacher. The teacher is allowed to quietly resign and not get fired. And then the new school district basically never learns about what happened in the previous school district. And I've heard that even teachers union agreements prevent that information from being shared to the new employer if a problem happens in the old public school district. So when you have these cases of abuse or just mistreatment of kids in the public school system, there's a reason why. And I'd say the system is largely to blame, in addition to the individuals who are found guilty of these things. Let's go to the next story, a little bit more up my alley, school choice. So this was kind of interesting. It reeks of the Democrats trying to have their cake and eat it too on Trump's new federal school choice program. I don't have the graphic with me right now, but there have been 31 states that have already opted into Trump's new school choice program. Now you might say, well, what is Trump's school choice program? Well, it was a provision included in the big, beautiful bill. And what it allows is a federal tax credit. If you donate to a scholarship granting organization, you can get up to $1,700 back on your federal taxes, and it's a dollar for dollar tax credit. So you're either giving that money to the government where they're going to waste it, or you're giving that money to a scholarship organization like ACE Scholarships, where they give that funding to a kid to go to a private school to get a better education and hopefully a better life in the long term as well. And so you can donate $5,000 if you want, $6,000, but you only get up to $1,700 a year. That got passed in the reconciliation package known as the Big Beautiful Bill. And the thing is that governors are required to opt in. You don't need the legislature to do it. The governor can unilaterally say, let's do this. And 31 governors have already said they were going to do it, including 2 Democrats, one Jared Polis of Colorado, and the other Kathy Hochul of New York, of all places, said that she was going to do it too. Jared Polis called it a no-brainer decision. He says that basically, why would I leave money on the table? Anybody can donate and get the credit, but my constituents in Colorado, Jared Polis said, can only get the scholarships if their governor opts in. So why would you allow money to flow out of your state if you don't opt in? Was basically the logic of Jared Polis. And I think he's right there. There's an irresistible incentive to opt in. That's probably why even 2 Democrats have opted in, and the deadline's not until December of this year. It starts to actually take into effect in January, this coming January 2027. So I expect at some point all 50 states will opt in, much like the 21 drinking age, where, it took 4 years, but Wyoming ultimately came along as well after 4 years, with every state deciding on 21 because it was tied to federal highway funding. So in Vermont, now Vermont is Bernie Sanders territory. And you might think Vermont would have a Democrat governor in that case. They have supermajority, I believe, of Democrats in the legislature. It's a deep blue state. But they have a Republican governor. His name's Phil Scott. He's the only Republican governor who hasn't said, I'm going to opt into Trump's school choice program. And what this article lays out in the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and they figured this out before I did. This article came out today, is that Governor Phil Scott signed a bill that came from the Democrat legislature, which allows him to have the decision to opt in. They didn't take that away from him like they did in Rhode Island. The Democrats actually said they passed a bill to prevent any governor from opting in, that it requires also the legislature to do so too. And so that's what the Vermont Democrats were originally trying to do. They ultimately, when it got to the Senate, allowed the governor to make the decision, but they basically tied his hands. And it seems like these teachers union-backed politicians are trying to have their cake and eat it too. And what they did in the bill, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it because it flies in the face of the intent of the legislation, is they wrote in there that the governors can still make that decision, but that the money can only go to kids who are in public schools. So you can use it for tutoring, textbooks. You can use it for all these miscellaneous things, but it's basically giving a gift card to kids if they stay in the public school system to spend more money, but only if they stay in. But so the point of the bill was a school choice bill. Everybody knows this. The Treasury has made it pretty clear that governors cannot, pick and choose, and states can't say, well, we're going to put our thumb on the scale and only allow private schools or only allow public schools to benefit. They basically laid out that you can't call it one way or the other. You just have to make it open to public schools and private schools, which I actually kind of have a little bit of a problem with that. I don't think we should be double funding the public schools, but regardless of what I think, the bill says, and the Treasury has made clear, you can only use it. You can't only use it for public schools. You have to make it open. And so I think this will get either struck down. I had to look it up in the bill because I didn't believe it at first. I figured they must have looked this up and got it wrong. And sure enough, in the bill, it says the money can only be donated to organizations that give scholarships to kids in public schools. And then the next line says and kids and organizations that give scholarships for kids in independent schools, which then I was thinking they got it wrong because independent schools, that's private schools, right? Well, the next line says in independent schools that also that take in public tuition assistance. Basically, I had to dig into this because I didn't know what the heck that meant in the circumstance of Vermont. But what it basically means, it's their version of charter schools. So they're publicly funded, but they are independently run. So those are basically, I would define those as charter schools, and most people would across the country. And so they're saying that the money can only be used for charters in public, which charters in most states are defined as public schools anyway. Okay, so we'll get on to the next story. Vermont is a small state, but it's really throwing a wrench in things when it comes to nationwide school choice. You know who else is trying to throw in a wrench on the nationwide school choice program? No other than Randy Weingarten and Becky Pringle, the head of the two largest teachers unions in the country. Randy Weingarten we'll talk a little bit about later. Becky Pringle's the head of the NEA. They did a joint letter sent to all the Democrat governors. And what I thought was interesting here, the Wall Street Journal pointed this out, the editorial board as well. You can't see this because it's too small, but it says open letter to our Democrat governors. Basically, you belong to us, Democrats. We give you so much money from our union dues that we funnel to your political campaigns, and you better listen, or basically a veiled threat. We're not going to give you any money, because they put in here somewhere, and the cursor's probably not in the right spot, but they said something along the lines of, it's on the Democrat Party platform to oppose school choice initiatives like this. They get all the facts wrong, of course, but I put this, it's afraid, because why they probably thought no Democrats were going to opt in. Then they saw Jared Polis of Colorado, New York's Governor Kathy Hochul, and I think they're shaking in their boots at this point because they figure maybe Jared Polis is right. Maybe it is a no-brainer decision, and maybe and I don't see why Randy Weingarten and Becky Pringle wouldn't before this. I mean, public schools can start their own scholarship granting organizations, as you saw in Vermont. Vermont's trying to do it only for public schools, but in any state, the public schools can have a school district scholarship granting organization where you can incentivize people to donate to the public schools for their kids to have funding for tutoring on the side or after school programs. This can benefit the union staffed schools too. So this is a real head scratcher here. It seems like a political play more than anything else. Arizona's ground zero for school choice. It always has been. They were the first state to have an education savings account program, and it's made some headlines and for a couple of reasons over the past few weeks. I had exposed Craig Harris of 12 News, a local news station out in Arizona, for coordinating at the Capitol with Save Our Schools, which is a teachers union-backed initiative that was at one point funded by Randy Weingarten's American Federation of Teachers. And there were pictures of him in a group chat on a laptop with the teachers union group Save Our Schools and their board member, and they were joking about things. They were actually, they name dropped me. They name dropped other school choice advocates in that group chat. It's amazing that we were able to get some proof of this, that he's been coordinating with the teachers unions, at least their subsidiary group, the Save Our Schools, that fights against school choice. But the teachers unions and Save Our Schools in Arizona have tried to gather tons of signatures to put school choice on the ballot, to try to rip away scholarships from tens of thousands of families. And we don't know how many signatures they have. All I know is that when they tried this in 2022, they lied. They said they had like 160,000 scholarships. Come to find out, they turned them in, even after being in front of the camera saying, we have more than enough. Before they even got into validating the signatures, the top line number, they only had 88,000 signatures. They either were doing Common Core math or they didn't know how to do math at all. Either way, it's a free advertising for school choice and homeschooling. But now, the Republicans in Arizona sent a few measures to the ballot to put the unions on defense. One of them requires at least 60% of spending to go into the classrooms. So most of the money needs to go towards teacher salaries and other classroom expenditures. 60% that will go on the ballot. Because the Republicans voted on a party line to put that on the ballot. It doesn't have to go to Katie Hobbs for signature, because in Arizona, if the legislature passes one of these amendments, or initiatives, they can put it to the voters instead of to the governor. So they chose to do that. Another one is to ban taxpayer funding of teachers unions, which Idaho signed, and Governor Little signed a similar measure into law this year. Florida Governor DeSantis signed something similar into law this year as well. So no more taxpayer funding of teachers unions if the voters approve it on the ballot in November. And one other would be to save the school choice program, that even if the teachers union ballot measure passes, their third measure that they passed, the Republicans, before they closed session, was to make it ingrained in the Constitution in Arizona. If a law gets passed that takes away scholarships from military families, which hint, hint, that gets to the ballot measure that the unions are doing. If that were to pass, even on the ballot, it would be null and void in its entirety if it takes away scholarships from military families, which it would do. So it's the teachers unions out there in a catch-22, and I think they're salivating at a deal. They're trying to get a deal to maybe not take away scholarships, but to try to regulate the program. And it looks like that deal, even though sessions is over, they're still talking about it. And so this representative in Arizona is talking about it here. He said, look, we got this letter from the School Choice Coalition too. Many of the people on that list are my buddies, and they've said, maybe we should support a deal, because we don't know how many signatures the teachers unions have. We don't know how much money. Actually, we do know how much money they've already poured into this initiative. They've already poured in the NEA and the local affiliate. Most of the money's from the NEA, the National Education Association. They've poured $4.5 million into just collecting signatures to get this on the ballot to try to take away scholarships from kids. And so, the Republicans are like, well, maybe we should reconsider that deal and not lose any scholarships, and maybe we concede on a couple of the regulatory measures. They've already said that standardized testing is a red line. A lot of homeschool families don't want standardized testing. A lot of the private schools, they may be taking some sort of test already, but maybe they're not taking the state test. And so state testing is a total red line, not even a deal that'll be on the table. And I don't even think nationally norm reference testing is on the table either. It's like other things like background checks for employees, like things like that. And so the only way that happens, you might ask, well, the session's over. Everybody went home. Well, I've heard from little birdies in Arizona that the governor may be considering calling a special session on this. She's a Democrat, and she might be willing to say, you know what? The deal would be the teachers unions drop their measure, don't come after school choice. They can save their money. They can use it for elections or whatever else they want to spend their money on. And the school choice movement gets a win too, because they don't have to worry about whether they're going to have scholarships or not next year. Yes, they might have to concede on some regulatory measures, which we got to see what the actual deal is. So until that happens, at the end of the day, this might not even happen at all. Who knows if Hobbs will call a special session, because in Arizona, the legislature can call a special session without the governor, but they need 2/3 of the members to sign on. Are you going to get 2/3, which includes a ton of the Democrats, to sign on? I don't know. I don't think so, especially after people went home for session already. It's up to Governor Hobbs to do so. I need to get through these stories pretty quickly because Jake Altman is already backstage, so I'm going to loop him in here in a second. But I just wanted to share, go check it out on my X account. There are families who are showing up to the signature gathering locations in Arizona. This is what they did in 2022 as well, to stop them from getting enough signatures. And it's a very nice woman who is saying, look, my kid uses school choice. And you can read, I'm circling here because you can read the clips, even if you don't have your sound on. And she's basically saying, look, what they're saying isn't true. We have a lot of guardrails on the school choice program as already. We have to do all these receipts and whatnot. And if it's found to be unallowable spending, we have to pay it back, or we're going to be in big trouble, basically. And so we'll see if that's a sign of good things to come. Hopefully more parents are standing up for their rights. In Pennsylvania, a committee in Pennsylvania, which their House is controlled by Democrats right now, they voted on a party line in the committee to take away 30,000 scholarships from kids at the state level. It went to the House floor. It passed 105 to 97, all Democrats in favor. They took out the provision to rip out 30,000 scholarships, but it still regulates the program. And I looked at, was it who voted which way? There were actually 3 Republicans who voted to regulate the school choice program. And lo and behold, I looked up the Republicans, and at least 2 of them were endorsed or funded by the teachers union. So there you have it. You can't only look at political parties. Sometimes the unions in some of these swing states have control over the Republicans as well. Look at one of my most recent tweets, Texas Christian Universities, where I live here in Texas. We basically got an undercover video. This person saying we're Christian in name only. Basically, we're Christian in a lot of ways, but we are not. We are very progressive. So she's basically saying if you're progressive, you're not Christian, I guess, which very strange thing to say. I guess she's either admitting something. I'm not sure, but she says that DEI is only growing in their curriculum at Texas Christian University. That is a big no-no, especially if the state receives, if the university receives federal funding. I was watching the New York congressional primaries the other day, and there was one in particular that I was watching for weeks. This guy, Anthony Constantino, he was endorsed by President Trump. His opponent, another Republican, Robert Smolin, bragged about being endorsed by the teachers union, not just any teachers union, the New York State Teachers Union. And he was endorsed by them, and he bragged about it. Oh, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. He lost by 18.5 points against the Trump-backed Anthony Constantino, who supports school choice. So school choice is a political winner. And I told Jake I'd only take 15 minutes before looping him in, so I need to shut up. I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to loop in our special guest, Jake Altman, who, if you don't remember, he was one of the staffers at a union that's at the University of Michigan that's affiliated with Randy Weingarten's American Federation of Teachers. So Jake, thank you so much for coming on the Red Pen podcast, and thanks for letting me blabber a little longer than expected.
Oh, happy to be here, Corey. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Look, I've been checking out your stuff on X for quite a while. I'll put a link to your X account for people to follow in a little bit. But could you give a little bit about your background? And I just kind of threw it all out there a second ago that you were kind of attached to Randy Weingarten's union in a way. Could you explain that relationship and how things have happened over and progressed over the years?
Yeah, sure. So I started my labor career in Michigan working for a local affiliate of the AFL-CIO, which includes many AFT locals. And then I moved on to the American Federation, the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, before it became affiliated with AFT. So I left there before the affiliation and went to work for an AFT local at Michigan Medicine, which is affiliated with the University of Michigan, a local of healthcare providers.
Okay, so when did you leave the University of Michigan affiliate?
Yeah, so I left a few years ago to become a stay-at-home dad. And then some troubling things started to happen on campus, in the campus community, that just attracted my attention, things that worried me as somebody who cares deeply about the labor movement. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? So for instance, there was a just very aggressive focus on putting pressure, intimidating public officials, university officials, related to the university's position, supposed university investments in the state of Israel.
Okay, so I actually have a headline on this, Jake.
Yeah,
I saw this the other day that the Department of Justice just indicted 8 conspirators who threatened University of Michigan officials, businesses, and the Jewish Federation. So I think you've been tracking some of this since it started. Could you give us a little bit of a back, before the indictment, obviously, but what the heck, what in the world was going on at the University of Michigan? And I think this goes back to the October 2023 massacre, or could you
exactly
go a little bit, give us the history on that?
Yeah.
And
so that's really when the indictment alleges that this campaign began, and I was watching the campaign unfold in real time. so federal prosecutors just, I think on June 10th, indicted these 8 people. And the indictment alleges that the defendants and unindicted co-conspirators orchestrated detailed plans to threaten University of Michigan leaders, law enforcement, businesses, with coordinated criminal acts. And their goals, again, were to force the University of Michigan and other businesses to sever all perceived ties with Israel. Just to put it in perspective, the university issued a statement saying that less than 0.1% of our money is indirectly invested in such companies. So this campaign is moving forward over 0.1% of indirectly invested money. But nonetheless, it alleges that they targeted, targeted these university officials, yes, beginning in October 2023, the former university president, the provost, the chief investment officer of the university, a University of Michigan police officer, several members of the Board of Regents, businesses, and the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit.
Why did they choose to start this in October 2023 of all times?
Exactly. I mean, immediately after the
crazy.
attack, immediately after the terror attacks on Israel, the union on campus issued a statement. I know that many members left after that statement because they felt like the union was not being sympathetic to them. They were very concerned that there was very little compassion showed to the people in the aftermath of October 7th who had family members in Israel. And they felt like immediately there was this ideological edge to a campaign that was being driven forward by the union that was supposed to represent them, and that was supposed to be a fair representative for all employees, regardless of nation of origin, political views, and I think that was very troubling.
I want to get into some of the imagery that I saw in this Department of Justice indictment kind of press release. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on here? So here's some of the alleged threats posted to social media after quote unquote autonomous actions were targeting the homes of University of Michigan elected officials and the provost. I mean, this seems like a death threat. Like,
Yeah,
are these supposed to be body bags or something?
They're supposed to be body bags with blood on them. So they spray painted threats, including terms like intifada, along with symbols like the red inverted triangle, which is meant to convey that you're a target. They used red handprints, again, meant to convey.
No, there it is.
Allegedly to convey threats. There you can see some more of the graffiti there that targeted local businesses, the vandalism that was done to these local businesses, to the law offices of a regent, to the homes of a regent. They also allegedly caulked doors shut and bike lock entryways. They threw noxious chemicals in glass jars through the windows of some private
Is that what this is right here?
Yeah.
And then I see like they're targeting kids. Like,
yes. So the indictment details
there
were allegedly exchanges between the defendants discussing killing, tormenting, and terrorizing their targets, including discussions about specific officials' children, and their creation of a hit list. Yeah.
So look, I'm reading this on the Department of Justice. Then medical student Korkaya agreed to quote unquote kill. Look, you don't have to take my words for it. Kill, torment, and terrorize their targets and families. Referring to one victim, Korkaya stated his entire family was on his hit list. Fayok added that they should get the kids of 2 victims. Stated, I'm going to be the dirtiest effing doctor ever. I'm going to be quote unquote victims or the victim's doctor. Poison her slowly. We need people following the victim to get into that house, then burn it down. Like, what in the world? And this is all because they're not on their side with the Free Palestine movement. It's because they support Jewish students. Like, what are
they're
these?
Not willing to conform to like the ideological demands of this group. I think unfortunately we're seeing like this pressure put on people to conform ideologically, and if you don't, then you're my enemy. You don't just have a disagreement with me, then you become my enemy. And
then like to escalate to violence I mean, this is
yes,
crazy. And so there's no sentencing right now or anything. This is just the charges.
they've been released on bond.
Yeah.
They've been charged. I think there have been some not guilty pleas entered.
Yeah.
Um, there's a campaign to raise money for them.
Oh, let's look at that.
Yes, and it's and part of the background story
Oh,
here.
they've gotten a lot of money.
Yeah,
$103,000 by who? Who's putting this on? Oh,
yeah, and so an AFT affiliate at the University of Michigan is organizing this. The Graduate Employees Organization, and you can see the banner they chose for their fundraiser. They have, and part of
and
the
what is the Intifada for listeners?
So there were a series of intifadas, but ultimately the second intifada included a lot of terrorist attacks on Israel.
Yep.
These are not, these are not nice things that are trying to be conveyed here.
Yeah.
And I think it goes along with the, really this larger campaign that they were, that was being waged.
So this
against
GoFundMe or whatever this is, whatever this website is, it's like a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
How long has this been up? A couple years, I guess.
This has been up for quite some time because this is not the first court case.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's jumped by, maybe around $20,000 or more since these more recent court cases. But there were some court cases having to do with some of the actions that took place on campus. And there was a lot of concern with those. But again, it's part of this larger ecosystem that we're seeing at the university where there's been this campaign. And part of this is that according to the indictment, the conspirators initiated an online campaign against their target as well. So they used social media accounts that were connected to student groups at the University of Michigan, including social media accounts affiliated with this coalition. There's a coalition group on campus, and the Graduate Employees Organization are part of that coalition group. They're a member of that group.
So this isn't the only AFT affiliate at University of Michigan, but it's the biggest, right?
I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's certainly a very vocal. AFT has a number of affiliates at the University of Michigan. Some of them are quite large. They have the lecturers union. You saw at the arraignment, there was somebody from the lecturers union in their lecturers union t-shirt saying that you shouldn't be punishing these people for advocacy. And so there is a narrative emerging from some activists on campus that this is, it's not, you showed the pictures.
Yeah.
But the narrative,
so their
defense
this is freedom of speech. We're just voicing our opinions peacefully. It's mostly peaceful protests.
And so part of this is that the Graduate Employees Organization has been involved in the social media campaign. I mean, they've amplified some of these messages we've seen coming from these other groups. They're a constituent part of the broader coalition. They're very much a part of this organization on campus. And we haven't seen, as far as I recall, any denunciation from the Graduate Employee Organization of any of these actions targeted at university officials, targeted at university.
Yeah, they're raising money for them.
And they're raising money for them, yes.
So what about, sometimes if you can't get their leadership to do anything, maybe you go up the ladder. So what about if it's an AFT affiliate? You'd think Randy Weingarten would be interested in this kind of stuff. She's Jewish herself, and this, if anything, even if she wasn't, this seems to be like a PR disaster for the American Federation of Teachers. Why would they want to, kind of have their rubber stamp of approval on this affiliate doing this, raising money for these people?
Yeah, I think, I don't know directly sort of the internal thinking of the AFT leaders at this point in time. I think that part of the calculus must be that there is a larger political concern, because just as you're seeing in the Democratic Party with the elections in New York and other places, we're seeing that there's an insurgency, and it is, they're organized, they're extreme. Labor unions are facing some of the same things, particularly in higher education, where,
didn't
there are political considerations.
Yeah, so the NEA, Becky's union, they did pass it. They passed the resolution to cut ties with the ADL, right? Yes. And then there was there was a lot of pushback, and then their leadership body, a smaller group, said, we're going to back off of this one.
Yeah, my understanding
they ultimately never went through. But
yeah. But so you can see that there are these forces inside education unions, not just higher education, but K through 12 as well, clearly, that have a particular view, and they're acting, within the organization. These are, to some degree, democratic organizations, right? Like members or delegates have a vote. If you're in higher leadership in one of these organizations, you probably have to be thinking, what do I need to do to survive politically?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and then what does that mean in terms of compromises that are made or things that go unaddressed that really should be addressed? I think these are fair questions to ask,
Yeah.
for members to ask.
Do you think
Um,
some members are feeling like they're just not representing me anymore? They're just not
yeah,
listening to
absolutely.
me?
I know that people have dropped their membership at the University of Michigan as a result of what's happened
Uh,
since October 2023, and not just in the graduate employee organization, but in other units as well. Um,
so they don't really make a big public stunt about it, but they've been there's whisper
yeah, people have
campaigns
left.
basically. Yeah.
People have left over. Really the just intensity of this campaign, the acts that they've seen directed at, people who even university officials, regents who were pro-labor, right? They were not immune from this campaign. Uh,
Right.
and I think, people in in the labor community see that, and I mean, are right to be very, very concerned about about what's happened in the community. And now with the indictment coming out, we're learning more and more of details of just how coordinated this was, who potentially was involved, and now again, who is fundraising for the legal
Mhm.
defense.
Yeah, it's crazy. Over $100,000 already. And I got to bring up, since you said some people are leaving the union, Americans for Fair Treatment helps people with leaving the union. And so there was a Janus decision in 2018 at the Supreme Court, which basically says that public sector employees in particular cannot be forced to pay union dues as a condition of employment. And so in red states and blue states, there's a lot of teachers in particular leaving their unions, which I mostly report on. And AFFT, Americans for Fair Treatment, just gave me data that they had internally showing that nearly 3,000 employees have contacted them for help with opting out of their public sector unions in the past 9 months alone. So they're kind of a new organization, but 3,000's, a big deal. You might say, oh, well, the teachers unions alone have like 5 million people if you add them all up. 3 million in the NEA, 2 million or so in Randy Weingarten's union. I think it's a little less than that now, but you might say 3,000 is a drop in the ocean at this point. But it's if enough people lock arms, that's still a lot of money. I think that's probably over $250,000 in dues that have been reduced from AFFT alone. So every little bit helps. And if some people start to make movement, maybe the people at the top start to listen, even if it's not, a million people leave, and maybe they start to say, hey, we don't have the same amount of funding we have had before. And maybe we don't want this trend to continue. So maybe we should listen.
Even at the local level, if a union is out of control, supporting things that are just absolutely unacceptable, members have the option of, this is the ultimate accountability, because
Yep.
the power comes from the cash flow.
I do some opposition research, if you didn't know, but I was listening to Randy Weingarten on a radio hit a few months ago in New York City. And, a public school teacher called in, a union member. And I figured this is Randy Weingarten's going on the station, a friendly station. It's a public school teacher. They're just going to tell her how great she is. But instead, this was before the mayoral election. The teacher wasn't mean to her. But he said something along the lines of, I pay my dues and all that. And I'm just a little concerned about kind of how far you guys have gone politically. And, why go out and endorse in the Democrat primary? Why go and endorse Zohran Mamdani, who said he was a socialist? Like, why do you have to go and get so political and spend our money that way? And Randy Weingarten basically gave him the best advice I had ever heard in my life, which was, you don't have to pay if you don't want to, essentially. And it's like, yeah, she's right, but it almost seems like she's drunk on power and thinks that nobody's. It's like like it's like almost a threat, like this pompous attitude of like, you really need me more than I need you, kind of thing. And so, um, I don't remember how the conversation ended, but it seemed kind of awkward to me. Had she just basically tell him, you can leave if you want. That's this is all voluntary. You don't have to give your money to us. And so we'll see. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened with that teacher.
I
That'd be
mean,
great if he reached out to me. I have no idea who he is, but
yeah. I mean, I dedicated my career to the labor movement, and we're in this situation where things are, not good, as what happened at the University of Michigan demonstrates, right? And this is not just the University of Michigan. You knew about Columbia, which is in public sector, but nonetheless, very similar incidents happened there, with the takeover of buildings, and
yep.
police being required
Is
to
this what
clear
they
them.
mean by autonomous actions?
So I think part of what
In
they
the
mean by
indictment, they kept
autonomous
quoting
actions is, right,
autonomous.
they, according to the indictment, they were quite aware of that they could be indicted. There was some conversation back and forth that's documented in the indictment. So allegedly, part of this is that there was witness intimidation, conspiracy to intimidate a witness as well, and 2 people are charged with that. So by autonomous actions, I think they were, uh, trying to distance themselves from any specific organizations because they're quite aware of potential consequences from actions like this, right? That should have consequences. So I think that's what they meant by autonomous.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
I just had to let people know that, yeah, it's been about 3,000 employees that left. And if you want to leave, if you're a public sector employee as well, and you want to get some help, you can go to myduesmychoice.org. I didn't come up with the name, but it's glorious. Myduesmychoice.org. You can go there and get help from AFFT with opting out of your public sector union too. That's not limited to teachers unions. There are other types of public sector unions as well. And I wanted to bring up, Jake, while we still have you, is that I wrote about this, and I know a lot of people saw this. I shared a video of it. I'm not going to bring it up today, but it was of Randy bragging to members of how she was bullying Target executives. She sent them a letter, and she had a meeting with them, and she was saying on this webinar to members that she was bullying the Target executives, saying that, we hold 7% of your stock, Target, in our pension funds, and you should really come out against immigration enforcement. Target, you're in Minneapolis. This is where a lot of this ICE action is happening. So if you don't take a stand, we own 7% of your stock. And so it seemed to me to be like a threat of Target. And I'm not like a expert in pension fund law and like the fiduciary duties of the people who manage the pension funds, but it seems like a breach of fiduciary duty in some way or another. Randy Weingart is the head of the AFT. They have AFT pensions. She's not the one who determines what the buy and selling is in the mix of funds in those pensions. So it isn't specifically her fiduciary duty, I guess, but it's almost all connected, isn't it? Like she could probably talk to people who are managing those funds. I'm not sure how it's connected, but they're AFT pension funds that she is using in a negotiation, essentially, to say, you got to do this political thing I want. And it's gotten so bad, Jake, that it wasn't just me that called this out. And it wasn't just the Target thing. There was a letter by a group called Consumers Research. Yes, Consumers Research. And they sent a letter to the Department of Justice imploring them to investigate this, because one of the things they mentioned was this with the Target. But they said, like, she was also saying not to invest in Tesla because she didn't like Elon Musk. And there was like a bulleted list of like 5 or 6 different types of activity like this. And so this isn't a one-off kind of example. I mean, it's bad enough alone, but there were other examples as well. And I think this is another reason why some members who maybe they didn't focus on this kind of stuff before, but now they're like, I thought you were here just to represent me, fight for higher wages, get me a good retirement. And now I hear you might be jeopardizing that retirement because of political disagreements. I mean, it's just, is a little
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, and the duty of the labor movement should be to first do no harm, I think, and what you're doing by telling Target that, right, is like we could influence your bottom line. We're a big enough player that we could influence your bottom line. And
That's what it
what
sounds
does
like.
she think is going to happen to the frontline workers at Target if AFT goes after Target's bottom line, right? Like, is there any thought about what, the consequences beyond her immediate political objectives? And I think the labor leaders used to understand that the health of the organization is very much tied to, the health of the frontline workers. And so I think, maybe that's become disconnected in the public sector, but ultimately, what are you thinking? Are you're going to hurt these Target workers? I mean, it's not a good play.
I'm just looking up real quick because I never let people just to take my word for it. You should, because I'm always right, usually right. All of us get things wrong. But here's the letter from Consumers Research. And here, because I said there was other things. You probably can't see it. It's too small, but specifically, AFT and its president, Randy Weingarten, have publicly advocated for or supported pressure campaigns targeting firearm manufacturers, efforts aimed at private prison and immigrant detention companies, fossil fuel divestment initiatives, heightened scrutiny and potential reconsideration of investment involving Tesla and SpaceX, consumer boycotts against Target, which we just mentioned, over political disagreements regarding DEI, threats of divestment from GM and Stellantis during labor negotiations unless union demands were met. And it's just, there you go. I mean, they put it all into a letter to the Department of Justice, and I hadn't even heard of some of these things. I think I'm pretty tapped into some of this stuff, but I'm all over the place too. So I didn't know about some of those bullet points, and it's just like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, don't you have a busy job to focus on? What can I do to make education better? What can I do to improve the working conditions for teachers and to make sure they're paid a little more? But it seems like those priorities have gotten all out of whack.
I think that's the case, yes. And I think, in particular, we see a lot of dues dollars flow up out of local unions where they could do the most good to national organizations. And then what happens to those dues dollars, right? A small fraction are spent on representational activities and a lot go
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere. And I think that's a real concern.
I looked at the NEA's LM2 reports, and I don't remember what the AFT's was, but NEA's showed about 9% of the total $430 million or so budget was spent on representing teachers. And then,
Shocking.
and then there was so many buckets though, like just the political stuff that was only like 50 million, I think, but it was more than on representing teachers because there's so many of these different buckets. It wasn't like representing teachers and then the other 91% is political.
That's
There was
true.
like other buckets too, but
yeah, there's also questions of like under the big category, I forget exactly what it is, but it's like grants and things like that. Like, where is that money going and what do some of these organizations that get these grants do? And in a sense, are they part of this political ecosystem, even if it's not party political candidates?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up the department. So AFT has an LM2 report.
Yeah.
And, you'd think if I would just Google AFT LM2 reports, I'd be able to find it. Maybe this is it. You probably know better than me if this is AFT.
There was a good article in documenting some of this called
There
How
it is.
Teachers Unions Became, I think it was How Teachers Unions Became Political Big Spenders, that goes through some of the LM2s and just gets into the details about where some of the spending is going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of this. It'll say like, here's our chief executive and how much they spend on travel and their salary and stuff. But I could have swore, I'm not going to go through it now. We don't have enough time. But
yeah,
I probably tweeted about it at some point. It's probably easier for me to find my tweet of the screenshot. And I'm pretty sure I did. When I looked at Randy Weingarten's, it said something like 10% of her time was spent on political activity. And I'm just over here like, everything she does is political activity. How can 10? I don't know if it was 10, but I remember it was a number where I was like, that doesn't. And I guess we can't really verify it unless we have like a timesheet of where she is every day. There's no really way to. It's like non-falsifiable almost. And so I don't know if there's a penalty to having too much of that time being political or not. I don't know why they would have an incentive to make it lower. I don't know enough about that. So
under the old system, it made sense under the old system prior to some of the new court rulings where you could have agency fee payers. So people who didn't necessarily pay the full cost of membership, but paid a proportion. And so some of that, if my recollection is correct, because I primarily worked in states that always had, where workers always had the right to opt out of the union. But if my recollection is correct, it made sense under the old system because then there would be a prorated amount that agency fee payer would pay to make sure that they were not paying for, or in theory to make sure they were not paying for that political time.
So yeah, in some states you could check a box to not pay for the political stuff, right?
Yeah,
but
that sounds
there's
right,
really
yeah.
no way to verify, right? Even after that, like even today, right?
I mean, it's a good question as to what extent this is an honor system.
Yeah.
And what it would mean to change it. I mean, from my point of view, ultimately, I think you could do a lot in the labor movement to reduce costs and to lower dues dollars. If you wanted to have a strong, successful labor movement focused on what the representational needs that the workers want, like you said, right? Conditions at work, salary,
basic stuff.
Instead, a lot of dues money is going to these big national institutions that have just taken on a life of their own.
Yeah.
And to politics.
Yeah. So what are the next steps with this case from the Department of Labor and the indictments? So do you have any sense of how much longer until we'll kind of get some answers here, or is it kind of an open question?
I do not. Last I was aware, the individuals were out on bail. So they had been granted bail, and I think it's something I'm going to continue to be watching very closely. So follow me on X at Trade Union Jake, and I'll share updates, and we'll see how it unfolds. But hopefully, ultimately, some of the victims will, who I think, it's very scary when you have young children and people come to your house in the middle of the night and throw stuff through your window, right? Hopefully, there will at least be some sense of relief for the people who are on the receiving end of this campaign of, what did they call it in their chat, to terrorize people for political disagreements.
And you can also check out Jake's writing. You've been in the City Journal a few times as well.
Yeah. So I'm in City Journal, and I also write for Michigan Enjoyer here in Michigan.
Boom. Yeah, so make sure you follow Jake. He's at Trade Union Jake Altman. And him and I have been looking at similar stories for a while now, so I'm glad I was finally able to get him on the show. And anything else you want to promote before you go?
No, I'm just very happy that you had me on, Corey. I think it was a nice conversation, and clearly there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And so, I appreciate quite a bit of what you do, and let's keep working on this.
All right. Thanks, Jake. And thanks everybody for tuning in to the Red Pen podcast powered by Americans for Fair Treatment. Chip Rogers, the CEO, wasn't with me today. We all miss him. He'll be back with us next time, but we got Jake Altman this week. So that was great as well to give us the inside scoop of what the heck is going on at the University in Michigan with a lot of the anti-Jewish sentiment on campus, and a teachers union affiliate, an AFT affiliate, raising money for the defense of these people who obviously looked like death threats in those pictures that were included in the Department of Justice press release. Go follow Jake. He's at Trade Union Jake. And if you want help leaving your public sector union, Jake left a union. You can do it too. It's myduesmychoice.org. Thank you guys for coming out and watching. Until next time, this was the Red Pen Podcast.